So the arts organizations, Joseph Papp of the Public Theater turned down his NEA grant because of his fear of where this was going. He refused it and said at the time, and I think this is very true, that were it not for the NEA, and if we abide by what the Helms Amendment says, a piece of work like a chorus line would never have been produced. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the proposed amendment, the proposed Helms Amendment, a chorus line, the musical chorus line, does not fit that amendment. It would be considered obscene.
Thanks. We've got a good discussion started. I'm going to add a little perspective here and go to a drop-in, a couple-minute drop-in that give us a little more perspective, then come back. We'll carry on the conversation, talk a little bit about the First Amendment, remind viewers to call in with their questions and comments, and please keep them brief. The drop-in is from again, from the censorship series produced by Deep Dish Television.
So the people who need the First Amendment most are the people who have the least political power. Now, does it always work to protect those people? No. Of course, the courts are susceptible to the same kinds of prejudices and biases that affect society at large. But sometimes the courts are very brave in protecting the unpopular. Flag burning. Flag burning wasn't very popular as an activity with the Supreme Court, but it held its collective nose and said people are allowed to burn the flag in symbolic protest.
When the school announced that it was holding the first minority art exhibit in recent memory, I immediately decided to enter the installation. What is the proper way to display the U.S. flag?
To see something like this and disgrace our flag? The flag that we fought for, that we love.
I chose this piece because I feel that it represented the hopes and aspirations of many oppressed minorities, both here and internationally.
You don't even know how to... That's not disgrace. If you want to disgrace something, why don't you go to Russia or someplace and do it? And see what you do. You want censorship, you go to Russia.
You protect things even if you don't like them, because you protect the power of people to say things that even you don't like. No, there is not equal speaking power in society. And one of the reasons that the NEA, one of the reasons you should have public funding for the arts, one of the reasons it's a good policy, something that America should be for, not against, is that helps to bring what would otherwise be poor or silenced voices into the culture.
Let me quote from the 1965 enabling legislation. While no government can call a great artist or scholar into existence, it is necessary and appropriate for the federal government to help create and sustain not only a climate encouraging freedom of thought, imagination, and inquiry, but also the material conditions facilitating the release of this creative talent.
We're talking about censorship in the arts, live from the Downtown Library. Now, we bring a new element into the discussion, and that is unpopular views. And if the First Amendment stands for anything, it's expressing views, art, opinions that are not popular. I mean, anybody can sort of support things we agree with. So, given that, Jill, is there not some way the government should think of some controversial things and support them, instead of just going with things that don't upset anybody?
I would never suggest that freedom of expression isn't important. Of course it's important, and we should work very hard to protect the rights of everybody to say things that are unpopular as well as things that are popular. But when it comes to NEA funding, we're talking about public funding for works, some of which have been determined to be pornographic and objectionable. Nobody is saying that those works of art shouldn't be produced. What I am saying is that if we are going to provide public money for any kind of work of art, it should be something that the people who are supporting it feel comfortable about supporting it, not something that people find pornographic or offensive. I'd like to go on and say that there has been a lot of misrepresentation regarding the number of works of art that have been objectionable. I think it's out of 95,000, 36 of them have been controversial. that's a good record. I think we need to work to do even better than that.
But I'd say better is more controversial, not less. I mean,
I don't disagree with you that every artist should be able to express himself or herself, and that if it's controversial, that can be good because it can make us think and see something from a different point of view. I don't disagree with that. Where I disagree, at least I think I disagree with you, I'm not sure what your position is, but my position is that we shouldn't be using public funds to support those works that the public finds objectionable and offensive and pornographic.
Okay, I want to remind viewers to call in, an audience. We have a great audience tonight if you have any questions. But you'd have to say, too, the government funds a lot of questionable things.
With a lot of homeless people in the United States and a lot of other problems facing the American taxpayer, I find difficulty in taking the taxpayers' money and giving it for the purpose of funding art. In particular, when the people can themselves give these monies to the charities of their own choice. If they want to support the art, they can write the check themselves. They don't need the government to stick its hand in their pockets and pay it for them and tell them that the government knows better than they what they should donate their tax dollars to.
There's a saying which is not at all to diminish what you said, but it goes something like, art is bred from the kitchen up. And I would suggest in response to what you're talking about, that if we're talking about deflecting funds, governmental monies, that is not the place to do it.
I would suggest that the government in the United States is supposed to be limited government, and that which guides the interpretation of the First Amendment and all the other amendments is the preamble to the Constitution. And I don't interpret anything in the preamble to the Constitution as saying that government should stick its money in the pockets of the public and give that money to any particular group simply for purposes of supporting art. It does not. You don't have to have money to exercise your free speech.
In fact, the government provides very, very little money for art. I believe it's $178 million, Chris, does that number sound right to you, for fiscal year 92? If you don't think we should support any of it, that's, in your judgment, would be $178 million too much. I don't agree with that because maybe it's because I come out of the field of education, or maybe I think that all young people who have whatever talents should have the opportunity to develop those talents. And we sometimes put a higher priority on things like math and science than we do art. And I think that the child who's born with the gift of the ability to sing or to dance or to paint or whatever, I think that child should have an opportunity to develop it. And I don't think that we should rely just on the private sector to do that. I think it's very important for kids to have those opportunities.
I also think it's important. I agree 100% with what you were saying, but I also think that it is important to realize that while we are endowed with certain inalienable rights, and one of those is the pursuit of happiness, I don't think the pursuit is easy, especially for people like the homeless, for lesbian and gay women, for Latinos, for African Americans, for the handicapped, for those with mental illness. But I think it's also important to realize that the artist in this country today is speaking for the disenfranchised and wants to speak for the disenfranchised. And many of these artists who are being told they can't have any money to do this are being silenced. And I think it is important to realize that many artists do understand these issues that you're talking about and are speaking out against them. And part of this speaking out is why people are trying to silence them.
I think the problem is in how people view art to begin with. Let me put it one simple way, and then I'll go back. We have a $9 billion drug program, interdiction, education. My belief is if we had a $9 billion arts and education, in particular, arts and education budget, we wouldn't need a $9 million drug budget. And what that is that we're not funding arts per se, or the simple painting of a picture or the writing of a piece of music. We're funding culture. And the drug problem in particular is a problem of culture. It is not a problem so much of economics or of crime as the fact that there is a hunger out there for drugs that has been created by what I would call a deterioration in values in our culture. And if there is anything that the arts represent, it is a system and a tradition of values that are worthy of support simply because they provide an alternative to unsavory and unappealing kinds of behavior. Our government, I think, got slightly off on the wrong foot when it said just say no as the solution to the drug program. And I noticed that just, too. I mean, that's all you have to do. But they're only talking about half the equation. You have to have, at the same time that you're saying no, you have to have something positive that you're going to pursue, dedicate yourself to, improve at, so that you won't be involved in these other kinds of more negative things. We're too much a no-saying society, especially in the way we put out government funds, rather than a yes-saying society. Same thing's going on in the whole education question. So my feeling is that yes, social programs need all the funding that we can. This is a social program. The arts are a social program, and they should be funded as much as other programs for that reason.
I have a question for the panel. The Bill of Rights, in my estimation, is not to tread on other people and hurt them. The drop-in I just saw, tomorrow is December the 7th. You realize what happened 50 years ago? You weren't here. But do you remember the picture of the Marines putting the flag up on Guadalcanal? They're all dead. And this kind of thing goes on. I try to be a good citizen, and I don't love the flag for the flag itself, but I love the flag for my country. And that disturbs me when I see something like that. It hurts me. It hurts me because I know people that died for that flag, not only in the World War II, Korean, Vietnam.
I don't have an answer for that, but my father-in-law does. He was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. He's there right now, in fact. He's gone there on a vacation. We had a discussion last summer when we were talking about book burning and flag burning. Here's a man who is a rather conservative politics. And quite unsolicited, he said, you know, I don't like flag burning. I can't agree with anybody who's doing it. But the people who really disturb me are those who would burn a book or censor someone's thought. That is far, far worse. He said, that's what I was fighting for, is the freedom to think and to speak as you would. He had the credentials.
I also think that the artist, and whether we think that was art or not, I think that the artist has always been one that wants to shock your sensibilities and get you out of a sort of euphoric state in which we're saying everything is fine, everything is for the best in this best of all possible worlds, and get other people to talk. If you don't like it, get someone to speak up. I mean, this is what we tried to do in the 60s in the theater. We tried to jar the audience out of its complacency, to get them to stand up, to get them to scream, to yell, to say this is wrong. And I really find that we're going backwards again, and that the artist now is saying it's time to jar again, it's time to shake up, it's time to rattle some cages and upset some people.
It's really a matter of not steps, but in terms of what, again, Larry was just talking about the 60s and now, and if there are, if the flag isn't on the floor at all in that exhibit, then there's no question. It's where it should be, hanging on the flagpole. If it's on the floor, we wonder why. What the heck's going on here? Right. And a dialogue, as we just mentioned, is created that would otherwise be totally absent.
But
if I could,
yeah, go ahead,
I'd take a different point of view, and I don't think anybody could be more supportive of the right to freedom of expression than I am. But the flag, in my judgment, has the public ownership quality of any monument. In fact, I think the flag is a more important symbol than the Lincoln Memorial or the Washington Monument. And because of that, it seems to me that it belongs to all of us. And for that reason, I supported an amendment to protect the flag from desecration. And I do think that was the right vote.
Well, it seems that the question of censorship has been focused on sexual themes in art or the flag, but what about when art portrays things that are perhaps fascist, racist, derogative of an ethnic